Okay, we're going to finish up with part 2 of the ponder, filtering, and sorting, and it's going to look a lot like your assignment for this week. And let's go ahead and just take a look at what it will be doing. So as the user types in a search term and then clicks search, it will go through and search the different hikes and bring up one with that term in it. It's going to be not only looking for the title, but it's also going to be looking through the different tags that it has and the description that it has. So you'll notice EN is probably a part of this description because the EN is in Henry. So it's going to go through a lot of different filter conditions to get those 3 different areas. And you'll also notice if it's going to have a random hike just come up on the screen to begin with. So that's the idea. And so if you were starting this from scratch, of course, you're going to want to sit down and think about the steps that you might need. You do that computational thinking, pseudocode, whatever you need to do that. So if I was to sit down, I would probably have something like this, target all the elements that I'm going to need to either manipulate, change, or listen for an event to happen. And I know that I'm probably going to need the whole container where the hike is going to come out and search button, and then I'm going to display the random one, and I'm going to get the user's information to then filter it according to what I need there. So let's go ahead and look at how I might go ahead and get this started. So I'm going to go stay in Ponder here, and I'm going to call my HTML hikes, and I'm also going to call my JavaScript the same thing, hikes.js. All right, let's go ahead and go back to our assignment, and we'll get the HTML to get started, and I'll copy that into HTML. And you'll see, just like you had the apple crisp recipe kind of hard-coded in last week, inside of this hike container, you're also going to have a hard-coded hike, or I've had one here. But you'll notice that in JavaScript, this is all going to be dynamic, so I can actually just take this out right to begin with. But I wanted to kind of make it look more like what your homework would look like because you already have something in there. All right, and then in the JavaScript, I'll go ahead and get the JavaScript code to get started. And this just happens to be the object array. Now this is a much more detailed hikes object array. So this whole first object is one hike, and the next hike, and so forth. And it's got a lot of different properties here, name, stub, images. We're not going to worry about some of these getting output on the screen, but you'll notice that it does have that tags, which is an array. So it's going to have an array within each object, just like we saw with our animal traits earlier. And it has a difficulty here. And if you noticed while we were looking at this, the difficulty is going to be this little boot. So it's going to kind of represent how you're going to be doing the star ratings in your recipes. And you're going to be looking at this number to know how many boots or how many stars in your homework you're going to be using to put that many on there. Okay, so a little more advanced, looks more like maybe real data that might be coming in from an API or a database that you have converted maybe from JSON to a JavaScript object list. So this will be a good real life example here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save those two. And let's look at the pseudocode, just kind of follow along and see where we might need to get started. So first thing here, it says target all elements that will need to be manipulated in some way. Now I know that I'm definitely going to be changing the content of this hike container a lot. So I'm going to go in here under my object array, and I'm going to be setting up a variable for that, or a constant hike container. And it had an ID of hike-container. And then I also know that I'm going to be listening for this button to be clicked right here. So they were searching for that search term, and I need to be listening for that button. And I haven't really given an ID or class as my only button, so I'll go ahead and just say let button Okay, so I know I've got at least a couple of the different elements that I can get out that I'm going to be able to use now in a variable. All right, next it says get a random hike to begin with. I need to know how to get a random number between 0 and length of however many hikes we have, and that could change depending on, it could be somebody else's data, so we don't really have a set number there, so we're going to have to use the dot length property there. And then we need to put it onto the screen. Now this one line of pseudocode or computational thinking step is actually a lot. And so I'm going to have you paste it, but we're going to talk about what all that code will be. But let's go ahead and get the random number first. So we're going to say, let the random num be assigned the math object with the floor method. So that means it's going to take it down to the next whole number, no matter what the decimal place is. And then we're going to say math object again, random. This is going to be our random number between 0 and 1. And then to make those bigger numbers, we're going to say hikes.length. So what that's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 hikes. Now that could change. That's why we can't just put 5 in here. Whoever owns this data could change that all the time. It could be changed daily. So we want to make sure we're using something that's going to keep up with that. So we can just take a look and make sure that's working okay. And let's go back to hikes.js here. Okay, hard-coded hike is coming in, but I want to see if we got a random number of 4. So if I keep refreshing this, I'm going to get 3, 4, 3, 2, 0, and it should never go over 4, because really it's going to be 0 through 4 is what we're getting here. So the next step in there was to get this output onto the screen. So to begin with, it's just this random hike that we have. So all that's in here is a number 0 through 4, basically. So it is 5 different hikes here, but because we're using floor to bring it down, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that will give us a random number. And now let's go ahead and just grab this code because it's a lot of typing and a lot that I don't want to get wrong. So I'm going to leave some of it out because the stuff I'm leaving out is new. So I am in the possible solution information. So I'm going to start at tag template right here. This is all just getting output on the screen. Whoops. And so I'm not using the copy button because I don't want to copy everything. And I'm going to copy right to there. So from tag templates function to the render hikes function. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of that and put it on the screen. Okay, so let's go through this really well. So once we get a random number, we need to start this render hikes function. And so we're going to go ahead and do this little bit here. I guess we could have copied that as well. So what this is doing, sometimes you want something to go ahead and run right off the bat. And that's what this init function is doing. It's short for initial or initialize. And we're going to be saying, as soon as this page opens, run this init. And go ahead and render hike, which is going to put the output on the screen. But do it with our random number that we just set up. So it's going to take one of our hikes from the array, and it's going to take either 0 through 4. So one of these hikes will get chosen, and it's going to call this function, and that's going to be the parameter, that one hike, and it's going to come in here, and it's going to say, hey, take the HTML that you get from another function and go ahead and put it on the screen. And then if there's multiple hikes, which this is made so it can be reused later, so if they're searching and multiple hikes come up, they won't replace each other because they've got a plus equal. But for our random one, we'll just be getting one anyway. But notice we've got a call to a function inside of the render function that's actually going to get the HTML. And this is a template literal that you would have gotten from this information right here. So when you have the apple crisp recipe from your homework, you're going to be taking that, and you can either cut it out or replace it, however you want to do that. Paste it in here, and then change all the values that you had in HTML. Let me bring it back really quick for a minute. So you'd be changing this to be one of those template literal values that you're going to be doing. This would be changed, this would be changed, and so on. So you're definitely going to be changing it a little bit in here, and you're going to be surrounding with the back text. So that's what this is right here. And I'll go ahead and leave that out of this one. Okay, so we just have an empty div, but you will be using what you set up the previous week with the classes and IDs, exactly how you had them with CSS, working perfectly with your Flexbox. You don't want to mess it up. And you will be bringing in here and just replacing some of the content between the tags in this way. Now again, within here, we have another call to a function. This is why I wanted you just to paste this so you could kind of get it. This one is calling tag template. The reason it's doing this is because you're using a map to go through every tag. You can't just make one button. You need to make one or more buttons. So if you notice the tags up here, this one has 2, this one has 3, and so forth. This one only has 1. So you don't know how many times you're going to need to put in a button. So what this is helpful to is it's saying, hey, go ahead and call this function, send in the tags, whether that's 1, 2, 3, and go ahead and take each tag, make it a button, and return it back to the same area you were called it from. So you're going to have multiple buttons that will be able to be shown up here, which is pretty cool. Same with the difficulty. You're going to be getting a number 1. If you look at the difficulty here, you're going to be getting like a 2 or a 1 or a 3. And that number is going to come in right here. But that number is going to be sent to a function called difficulty template. Right here, it's going to bring in that number. And it's going to do some of the accessibility, which is kind of cool with that number. And then it's going to use a for loop to go ahead and put as many boots, or in your homework's case, yellow stars, on your page according to how big your rating is. Otherwise, it's going to always go 4 times here. Or sorry, 5 out of 5 stars and 5 out of 5 boots. And as long as it's less than or equal to the rating, it will go ahead and put a boot or a yellow or golden star. Otherwise, it's going to do the rest of those 5 times with either this little empty icon or a white or empty star for your homework. Okay, so it looks like a lot, but it's really just a lot of, this is just handling your output to make sure that the multiple tags are shown up and the multiple stars come out properly, because we don't have the actual star icons here. We just have a number. So I wanted you to paste that because that's kind of a review. We've gone over that kind of stuff a little more in depth, but that's the idea there. Okay, so all that's doing right now is just getting that random one. We're going to reuse this render hikes, which then calls these other functions again after the user puts in a search phrase, and then we're going to run those all again. So they're going to be reusable. Now we want to wait and listen for when the user clicks the search button. So let's take a look at what it looks like so far and make sure that we're getting a random hike to come up. And there we are. And if I keep reloading it, you'll see that it'll get a random one each time. Okay, now we want the user to be able to put something in here and hit search, and it's going to go through and filter and sort our list. So let's start that part. Okay, this is kind of the new stuff that we learned this week. So I'm going to come back to where I targeted my button, and I'm going to put that event listener here. So we're waiting for that button to get clicked. So we need to add an event listener, the click event, and it's going to call a function called search. And what that search is going to do is it's going to go through, filter it, and sort it for us. So this is all new stuff that we learned this week. So I'll just go ahead and put it underneath here. So we'll say function search. And when that runs, we want to go ahead and get the value that the user put into that input box. So we're going to say, let's get the hike query from search input box. So we can come in here and that input has the ID of search. So we're going to say document dot query selector. And again, I could have targeted this earlier. And then we want the value from that input box. Okay, so getting the value from that. Okay, so now we have what the user, we're still in the search function, so make sure you're still inside that. And we're going to go ahead and now filter that out. So we're going to say, let the filtered hikes come from our original hikes. And that's the name of our array up here, our object array. And we're going to use the filter array method. And I'll put in an anonymous function here what's going to happen with each hike. So again, you could use the word items. I'm going to put each hike is going to come in here. And we're going to return it only if this or these conditions are true. And we're going to have multiple here because remember I said we're going to look at not only the name of the hike, but the description and the tags. So we're going to say, look at the hike array and look at the name property. Make sure it's lowercase. And if it includes that hike query, and that's also to lowercase because our user could have put uppercase as they typed, then that's one of the conditions. Now we want multiple. So we're going to say not and, but we're going to say or, and then put another condition. So that's just looking at the name of the hike. So now we want to say, I also want to look at the hike description. And as long as that description also includes the hike query. And then one more because we want to look at the tags as well. So remember the tags, when you're using an array inside of one of the objects, it's a little different. We saw that with the animals in our example before. So we're going to say tag, each of the tags. And it also needs to include the hike query. Okay, I was missing one of my parens, so I had to add that there. Okay, let's go ahead and console log that inside so we can see what we're getting back with that. Okay, so if I search for falls and hit search there, you'll notice that I do get those two with the name false on there. And they're not both coming up on the screen yet because that was just our random one that we had going on there. But we do see that it's coming up here. So we see that we've filtered them okay, but now we're going to need to use our output. But before we output them, let's go ahead and sort them as well. We want to go ahead and sort them by how difficult they are. So we filtered them. Now we want to take that same filter hikes and we want to sort it. And we're going to be using a comparison function called compare hikes. And we're going to assign this to a new sorted array called let sorted hikes. Okay, so let's make this compare function. So let me go back to here and just grab that since it's something that's definitely reusable here. It's right here, but function compare hikes. I'm going to copy that. And we're still inside search. So we're going to go ahead and put it right here. Okay, and it already has the dot difficulty on there for us. So we're looking at our filtered hikes, and we can tell from our output here that they do have the difficulty ready to go right there. Okay, so now we want to get each of these hikes that are in the filtered hikes and now in the sorted to show up on the screen. Here's where we can reuse that output code that we had. And we're going to go ahead and say hike container, because we already had that up here, right in this div here. And we've already targeted it right here. So we can go ahead and use that. We're going to say the hike container, change its inner HTML So something that's already maybe on the screen right now, we want to get rid of. So maybe that random one we need to get rid of when they have a search term and the new terms need to be shown. So we're going to go ahead and just make that empty quotes. And that can be single or double. And that's just going to kind of clear out that whole hike container so that it's going to be empty again. And then we're going to go ahead and say, take that sorted hikes that we just made. And for each one of them, I want you to run this anonymous function, send in the hikes one by one, and I want you to take that and send it to the render hikes function and send in each one. Okay, so again, and it doesn't have an S, that's why I was getting dots, render hike. So then it's going to come back up to the render hikes, or down, I guess, that we included here, and it's going to be able to run the same thing again. And remember, we did have that plus, so if we've got more than one this time, it's going to show them all on there. Let's go ahead and save that and make sure everything is looking good here. I'll try falls again, and it should bring up both the falls. I can do EN like on the video, and it should bring up the EN in Henry, EN in Banan, EN in Donata, and I could bring in maybe the keyword beautiful, and 4 of them come up. So a lot of them have the word beautiful in there. Anyway, so that is the idea. And if you notice, they are sorted by difficulty. So the ones that are least difficult are first, followed by the more difficult ones. All right, so there we have an example that's pretty detailed, but it's very real life. It's taking a number and giving us a rating, and it's taking an array and giving us a little array tag for each one of those, as well as letting the user choose keywords to filter the array objects by, and only those will show up on screen, and they're sorted in difficulty order. So hopefully that will help with your assignment this week. It will be very similar with your recipe assignment.